Hi there, I'm Ahsan and you're watching me on YouTube and Facebook Live. Today we are going also on LinkedIn Live. Today we are going to talk about global warming. What are its causes and impact? And when we say global warming, what is global warming? Global warming, in simple words, we can say it is heating up the planet Earth. And when it is mostly by the emission of the greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and other gases, industrialization, agriculture, deforestation, and many other causes. These are some of the top. And what are impact of global warming? Its impacts are flooding, overraining, droughts, change in the weather cycle, and extension of jeopardization of many species. Now the question is how global warming works. And as I said earlier, greenhouse gases, approximately 90% of the global warming is caused by the emission of greenhouse gases. And those gases, uh, they absorb, like carbon dioxide, they absorb the sunlight which comes to our planet and doesn't let it go and into the space. However, when when it absorbs all the sunlight, it increases the temperature of the atmosphere and results in the form of melting of glaciers. It first it is rise in the sea level, and secondly, the heat in the atmosphere it increases the evaporation rate, and those vapors turns into heavy clouds and storms. They bring storms, heavy rains in some parts of the world, and we see droughts in the other parts of the world. And change in the weather cycle, overrain and droughts, they have caused the extinction of many species. And global warming, how it works, what are its causes, is it real? And as far as I researched, I was reading it yesterday that approximately 90 to 100% of the scientists have a consensus over the fact that the temperature of the world, of the planet Earth, has been increasing approximately 1 degree centigrade or Celsius. I have to confirm it, but it increases every year. And some of the environmentalists even say that it is increasing and it is much higher than ever before. Global warming is our topic, and to discuss this topic, my guest is Edward Konowicz, and he has joined us from Virginia, United States.
Well, to put most of you at ease, I'm going to disagree with most of
Okay,
what Ahsan said. I think he's repeating the propaganda
okay.
concerning global warming, and it's just not true. The Earth, I do think the Earth is warming,
Mhm.
and we
But you
have
don't,
what's called
but,
corporate science. We
mhm.
have
but you
science
don't
that,
agree with the context, with the narrative.
well, I think there's more moderation. I think the winters are generally less severe,
Mhm.
moderated. And I
Yes.
also think in some places the summers are moderated. I know where I live, it's about 1 or 2 degrees cooler in the summer. And we by now we should realize we can't rely on the television or the government to give us proper data.
Yes.
But I do agree we're on a rebound from the ice age
Yes.
and the earth is slightly warming. I agree with that.
Yes.
I don't think it's caused by greenhouse gases. I think greenhouse gases cool the earth, and I'll
Mhm.
explain that, not warm
Mhm.
it,
Yeah.
including
It is.
CO2.
It is one element when we say global warming. Eh, just like industrialization is also the main factor of global warming.
Well, the major cause of global warming, let's 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 be honest.
mm,
is the sun. And if
yeah,
this narrative was um, explained correctly, we would see the temperature of Mars or the moon, and then look at whether their temperature has been steady or rising too, because we have to ask the question whether the
yeah,
sun is radiating more. If the Earth is getting warmer, and I think it is,
mm,
I think some places are obviously warmer, like Alaska,
mm.
and some winters are less bad, like we don't get snow. When I was um,
Hey, Jackie.
a kid in New Jersey, we had a lot of snow, and that is a
Mm,
warming effect. But the
mm,
summers here in Virginia are cooler,
mm,
despite what they say. And I know the government lies because I worked for them.
yeah.
I actually
On,
took the temperature each day, and this was like 15 years ago, actually 25 years ago. And some days in the summer, in July, first week of July, it would get up to 103, 104. And we had official,
mm,
expensive equipment to measure the temperature. I would write down on my sheets
mm,
104 degrees, and then I would check my sheet an hour later, and my supervisor changed it to 99. And I would get him, and he says, "Well, you read it wrong." So, well, let's go out. So we would go out to the temperature through the thermometer readings, and they would be 104 and 103. He wouldn't change it. He was told to lie.
yeah,
So the actual temperature readings are not reliable. I worked for the government. They lie.
yeah,
And anyone who's worked for the government will tell you they lie.
yeah,
That's the big thing. War propaganda, virus propaganda. You
mm,
can't believe what the government says. It's not
yeah,
a reliable source.
mm.
And those
Uh,
who object, like I did, are not rehired. We're
mm.
fired because we won't go along with the lies. So we just
The
can't.
narrative, the narrative might be different, but that's why the environmentalists and many experts have agreed upon the fact that the temperature is increasing, but
Not much. It's
yeah,
increasing,
yeah, yeah,
but
it is not.
it's more moderating.
Yeah,
So I think the overall effect is a slight increase.
yeah.
But the
Oh,
danger
oh,
is not temperature increase.
mm,
And you can look at history. The danger is decreasing.
mm.
Cold winters and summers are devastating to agriculture. The human race has
Jackie has a
always prospered under warm conditions, generally around the world. The threat
Jackie
is
has a
not
very
global warming. The threat is global cooling, not warming.
yeah. Jackie
I don't
asked a
know if any
question.
truth on Jackie comes out of the government or scientists. As soon as you report and read instruments correctly, you're fired.
Yes,
There is no legitimate science anymore.
yes,
It's all paid off, and they have a narrative they have to support corporate interests or political interests. You have to talk to people. You have to look at temperatures yourself. And of course, that's not fully reliable, but the scientific data was even proven that the global warming people were fudging their data. The emails were obtained, and it became clear that the global warming fanatics, the experts, were lying. We know that by now. The government
yes,
lies. So does
yes,
scientists and doctors, because politics and money drives the system, not truth. And a scientist is bought as easily, if not easier, than a politician. So, first of all, global warming is occurring. Is it dangerous? Probably not. The flash floods do not come from global warming.
so
The,
where does it come
the
from?
flash floods come from largely increasing pavement where we don't have watersheds, which is forests, wetlands. We have so much development and intrusion into nature, the natural watersheds, meaning they absorb water, the ground absorbs water, are decreasing, with increased pavement and buildings. So you have rapid runoff and rapid flooding, particularly in Europe and United States, because there's a growing amount of buildings and pavement and roads, and these are hindering the slow movement of water. Water now moves quite quickly. But we do have some unusual rains, but we can't assume that's from global warming. And greenhouse gases, let me explain this.
Okay.
Greenhouse gases do not warm the earth. Yes, they absorb infrared and other radiation and re emit it. They scatter radiation. They absorb the radiation and re emit it, they scatter it. So during the day, and everyone can observe this, and I'm a little frustrated that people can't think. During the day, water vapor, which is the major greenhouse gas, water vapor can compose up to 4% of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is less than 1%, is less than 1/10% of the atmosphere, is about half of a tenth of a percent, half of a tenth of a percent, about 0.04,
No, sir.
0.04 of a percent. It's not a percent. And if they get,
So,
if CO2 heats, it rises like a hot air balloon and is going to radiate away from the earth. Nitrogen in the regular air does not absorb heat well.
what about methane, ethane, and other gases?
What's that? Methane and other
Methane,
gases? They,
yeah.
they all emit, they absorb and emit, which means they scatter, which is they absorb from one direction, either the earth at night, because the earth's warmer at night, or the sun during the day. They absorb the radiation, particularly infrared for CO2, from the hotter area, because that's what's going to be hotter, so that's the more significant. And then they emit it in all directions. So the sunlight is coming down on the earth, the CO2 water vapor is absorbing it, then they emit it, which is they scatter it backwards frequently. So they actually cool the earth during the day. Clouds cool the earth during the day.
So,
You don't need a
if
scientist to tell you that.
so, what about the storms? What about the rains, heavy rains? Aren't they caused by the global warming because
No,
they inc
storms are, you got blizzards in the winter. Storms aren't caused by global warming, they're caused by differences in temperature, the jet stream movement of air masses, moisture movement, because moisture collects through electrical forces into clouds, and then you have thunder and lightning, because the electrical forces are holding them together, powered by the sun. So, no, global warming does not create storms. Otherwise, the Sahara Desert, one of the warmest places in the world, would have storms. What you are told are lies. If you can
what
think,
about changing the
look,
weather
the Sahara
cycle?
Desert's huge, isn't it? It's across all
It's
of North Africa.
changing
If
the
global
weather
warming
cycle.
created storms, you would have storms in the Sahara. So warming doesn't, and if cooling stops storms, you wouldn't have storms in the Arctic or Antarctic. You have tons of storms in the Arctic and Antarctic. The North Arctic Ocean is one of the stormiest places in the world, and it's cold. So what you're taught are absolute lies. You have to have some
Okay,
common sense.
what I meant was that some places on Earth they get heavy rains through storms, and some doesn't. And
Yeah,
the droughts,
some places get heavy
rains,
snowstorms.
Yeah.
And, it was not uncommon when I was young for there to be 8 feet of snow accumulating in upper New York State. I had friends that lived there. 8 feet of snow. Even in Virginia, Monticello, if you take the tour where Jefferson lived and the Blue Ridge and the Appalachian chain of mountains, they would get 6 or 8 feet of snow they would have to shovel. And that's in the winter. Yeah, I forget the ratio, 10 to 1 or something snow. That's still accumulation of 1 or 2 inches. The point of it is you can't accept what science says is science. It's not true.
So, so
During
what
the
do you
day,
think? So, what do you think?
CO2 and water vapor do
If
not have a
methane,
direction. They absorb
okay,
infrared from whatever is the source. So during the day, water vapor and CO2 are absorbing infrared from the sun, 50% of the radiation of the sun. I'll quote you stuff I know because
okay, no
everyone else
problem.
repeats what's on TV. They don't even know the data. 50% of the radiation roughly of the sun is infrared. Both water vapor and CO2 absorb it. When they absorb it, they're hotter, they rise. You can see that in a thundercloud. As they're heating up, they rise. The air is not heated by CO2 or water vapor much. Most of the
So,
heating of the air occurs on the ground. The ground absorbs the, the radiation and turns it into pure heat and it acts like a radiator. So if you're on the coastal plain or on a desert, it's going to be warm. Though you're closer to the sun on a mountaintop, there's not enough land on the mountaintops, just these little peaks, to radiate heat. So even though you're closer to the sun, of course, the air is thinner, which is you got less to convey the heat, but still, the mountaintop doesn't get that hot because it's a little land. It's not a lot of land like at a plateau. So the
the,
land is the big radiator that heats the air. CO2 and water vapor do not heat the air. They re-emit,
so
and they
you think
re-emit
sun?
what they absorb.
So
So,
you think sun is the major cause of global warming?
well, it could be. It hasn't been studied. I would have to see the figures, and we can't trust them anymore because we know they're lying. We captured their emails. I've worked for the government. We know they lie. It's politics. We don't have reliable data from science. And that's the same thing with the pandemic. We don't have reliable data of how many people really died from COVID because there's not
What?
accurate diagnostic tests. So we
Speaking
have to
of
use the data we know. We have to use basic science.
Speaking of when we talk about CO2 and heating up the earth and
No,
the
no, no.
sunlight.
CO2 doesn't heat up the earth.
Okay,
Let's let's
okay,
let's just when we talk about CO2 and its
okay,
mechanisms, we can talk about CO2 and how it captures
okay,
infrared
okay,
and what
okay.
it does with it.
Okay, when we talk about the sunlight, then the other point comes in is the depletion in the ozone layer.
Yeah, well, the depletion in the ozone layer allows higher frequency light, like blue light and X-rays, that come in. So it's dangerous. It
Yeah,
produces cancer.
yeah.
I mean,
I
people
think the
go
best.
around, people go around, oh, you got to be higher frequency. Higher
Yeah,
frequency damages your eyes,
yeah,
damages your skin. Higher higher frequency doesn't mean better.
yeah.
That's
And I
absolutely, I
think
mean, people repeat this stuff,
yeah.
whether it's government propaganda or YouTube propaganda.
But
People repeat
spiritual.
because they don't know science.
I think There's another propaganda, is spiritual propaganda.
What's that?
Spiritual propaganda.
Well,
Spiritual
the thing
propaganda.
is, human beings aren't reliable. You have to understand basic science. And I'm going to explain it to you again. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas. During the day, when you have clouds, it's cooler, not warmer. Clouds, which are greenhouse gas, make the day cooler, not warmer.
Okay.
Greenhouse gases cool during the day
Hmm.
because they scatter the infrared from the sun. If they scatter it, the infrared does not reach the land, the surface. It's the surface of the earth that warms the air. So when you go up higher, away from the general surface, it's cooler because
So,
the general surface is bigger at absorbing the infrared. During the day, the land takes light even higher frequency. It's called the black body, reduces the frequency and scatters it as heat and infrared. That's where at the ground you can walk on sand or walk on asphalt or concrete on a hot summer day. It's hot. It's heating the air. And you can see waves of the air as it's rising. You can see it rise off the land. Now, when you don't have much land, like in mountains, because you go up higher, you have less land because it comes to a peak. It gets cooler because you don't
so,
have all that land heating the air.
so, what do you think? What are the other elements that are causing global warming?
The increase of concrete, black asphalt, walk on a street during the day and walk on grass. There's a huge difference. That street is
Deforestation.
heating the air. A large part of global warming is caused by pavement.
Yeah.
Walk on
What do you think?
concrete,
What do you
but
think
walk on
about
grass.
what do you think about deforestation
Well, it's
and agriculture?
destroying
Yeah.
the biosphere. The
Yeah.
trees are a necessary part of the environmental interaction, particularly in terms of absorbing water, recycling, blocking the
and
sun,
and
conducive
cleaning
shade.
the
So, where you have a
atmosphere.
lot of trees, like in the rainforest, you have an abundance of life.
Yeah.
Where you don't have trees, where a lot of pavement is, like in a city or a desert, you don't have abundant life.
Yeah. I
Things
think,
have a harder time living.
yeah, growth in the population means more agriculture, and more agriculture means deforestation. You have to chopping up the trees, just like in we have seen it in Amazon, in Brazil. The prime minister or the president of or some high official uh, order for the agriculture. They are increasing agricultural land. They are chopping up trees.
Well,
They
it's not
believe the
just
fact.
agriculture.
Yeah,
They're using it for wood deforestation, for
yeah,
mining, to drive the native peoples out. It
yeah,
isn't just for agriculture.
yeah,
It's one of the reasons.
yes.
I mean, that's the
And
propaganda. It's only
yeah,
for agriculture. But
yeah,
agriculture has its own natural abundance and
yeah,
absorption of water, its own watershed, its own reduction of heat.
yeah.
I mean,
And
if you go walk in
industrialization.
a cornfield, it's cooler than walking in a desert or on a
Yeah,
street. So global warming is affected by the lack of trees, the lack of wetlands, the pavement, and other things. The greenhouse gases probably, because we don't have legitimate studies.
yeah.
The green because
What do you?
someone comes to a conclusion different than the political narrative, they can't get published. They're fired.
Yeah.
it's become really clear that we don't have pure science.
yeah,
And just by understanding the water vapor greenhouse effect, that clouds cool during the day. At night, they make it warmer. So a desert is very cool at night because the earth is heated during the day. At night, it radiates, and the clouds scatter it back.
yeah,
During the day, the clouds and CO2 scatter a lot of radiation back out to space. So clouds and CO2 during the day cool the earth. During
yeah,
the night, they warm it because they insulate. And Pete, thank you, Jackie. Jackie just made a
yeah,
complimentary comment.
yeah.
So the
So wait,
greenhouse gases cool the earth. They don't
so
warm it.
so one other cause, I think it is also, you also would agree with this, is industrialization and uh, 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 and atomic energy and nuclear energy is the major cause, is one of the major cause of global warming.
Well, I don't know whether it's major yet. If the nuclear industry keeps lying to people and claim the nuclear industry is green, it's not green.
It's not green.
The nuclear power plant generates a million times more heat
Then the
than a
carbon
fossil
dioxide.
fuel thing. A million
Yeah,
times more heat, direct
yeah,
heat. So they have these huge cooling towers because they generate so much heat. And they're destructive to human life. To say they're not destructive, well, go. These experts just say, oh, the radioactivity is not destructive. Well, go to Chernobyl or Fukushima and work on the reactors that melted down and clean it up. They can't. They go in the room, they're dead.
yeah,
Oh, but it's safe. And they can't
yeah,
even go in the room. They're liars. They'll tell you on one hand it's safe, then the other they can't clean up Chernobyl or Fukushima
yeah. Uh,
because it's too
So,
dangerous.
yeah. So how do you summarize it? What are your final thoughts?
Well, what you're taught in science is no longer true. It's political. You have to understand basic science and apply it because what you're hearing is half lies. Yes, the earth is warming, but we don't know that it's causing the warming until we see graphs on the moon temperature and the temperature on Mars. If the temperature on Mars and the moon, and we have reason to believe it is rising because the polar ice caps on Mars are shrinking, we have reason to believe that the sun is getting warmer. We see less sunspots. But we're not getting accurate data because the government has an agenda. And the agenda is to get people away from the dangers of herbicides, coal ash, mercury, lead in the water, fluoride, to get people distracted away from the things that are really killing them and their children and focused on CO2 is a distraction. If anything, CO2 is cooling the earth and helping trees grow.
It's a final question from Jackie. Why do they keep lying about everything?
Because something wants to weaken humans to exploit them and control them. And
Yeah,
someone who's weak and sick and or has a family member who's sick, they're overloaded. They
yeah,
don't have the time to do research and challenge corporate policies or the greed of those in power. So they want to weaken the people who they want to enslave and manipulate.
yeah.
And
In
all
the
these
end,
scientists, particularly the doctors on TV, there's just one lie after another. Because all they're there for is to push the propaganda. It's just
yeah,
constant propaganda. And I've experienced it myself. They're lying about the data. They're lying about the number of people dying and from what. They're lying about their tests. Nothing's believable from the mainstream media. You have to use a basic understanding of science to analyze things.
Yes, indeed. And I think we have covered from different angles. Uh, Perhaps you may disagree with the with different narratives and with the context, what is causing it, what is not, and Ed is right. We don't have enough valid data. We have to we have to collect data from various sources. Then we would be better able uh, to 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 come to a better conclusion. If you have any questions, just leave it in the comment box below. Leave it. Just go to Edward's profile and leave your question there, or leave it to me. I'll just refer to him. And one thing we all agree that the temperature of the Earth is increasing, and whether it is causing by the sun or some other factor, it is still a question and still a mystery what is causing it. And we will talk about it. I think we should continue, or we'll come back again with some other topic next week. If you have any questions, just leave it, and I'll see you next week. Have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, midnight, or wherever you are.